podcast.
Bring your friends.
Yeah, even like the best microphones out.
Yeah.
We're saving up for that. That's what we push. We're trying to push doing more stuff with Patreon and with the sponsors and stuff.
Yeah.
Which we have a new sponsors. It's a cannabis dispensary.
Yeah.
From Colorado that they've been very, very kind to us. They're super veteran friendly, which is the thing that really surprised me the most is how veteran friendly they are. Like, yeah, dude, you get like 35% off.
Oh wow, that's
what I'm
good.
saying.
Yeah.
That's wild to me. And when I had first approached them, I was like, listen, I love that because they really care about veterans who, like, dude, they treat you like a rock star in there if you're a vet. And not a lot of companies mean that, you know. So they're called Bloom Medicinals, and that's one of the things that I love about. That's one of the things that I love about the electrical stuff that you were showing me, which I want to keep talking about that.
Yeah.
But first of all, Mr. Jim McCarty, thank you for being on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I sincerely appreciate it. Eric has talked extensively about you.
Great.
For the past couple of months, and I know you're a busy guy, so thank you for doing this.
Well, your timing is excellent. We just put out a magazine, and I've got a rare couple days before we dive into another deadline.
So talk to me about the Rural Missouri magazine. Like how did this come about? Because this has been out. You guys are celebrating 75 years. You told me earlier, right?
That's right. Yeah, we just finished our 75th anniversary issue, which will hit the mailboxes at the end of December. Rural Missouri's been around since January of 1948. It's published by Missouri's electric cooperatives. It's part of a network of consumer publications that just about every state has an organization like ours and puts out a magazine like ours. Together, our circulation is 9 million. Rural Missouri is about 580,000, but when you put them all together, we are the third largest magazine network in the United States.
How did that come to be, though?
So to tell you this, I got to give you a little history of electric co-ops.
I got time.
And you probably got some listeners that don't know what an electric cooperative is or a cooperative at all. But let's say you have a need for a service. Most companies are only going to provide that service if they can make a profit. So let's go back to, say, the 1930s. If you lived outside of town, and I'm talking any town, with a population sign on it, it's as you enter town. Yeah.
Like Tunis, Missouri.
Tunis, Missouri, you could probably have electricity. But when you get outside the city limits, there was no electricity for you because there was no money to be made at it. You go out in a rural area, it doesn't take long. You drive down the road and you see a lot of cows and you see a lot of horses. What you don't see is a lot of houses. So we talk about density. You might see 3 people for a mile of line. Let's say a mile of line costs $100,000 to build in 1930. You got to divide that by 3 people.
Oh, wow.
Now you take somewhere like Springfield, it might be 100 people for a mile of line, might be 1,000 or 2,000. And when you do the math, it makes sense. You can make a profit on that. So what do you do when you can't make a profit providing electricity? How do you provide electricity? Well, you don't make a profit. That's the easiest thing.
Where you and the electric company.
So these electric co-ops organized in Missouri, and there's 40 of them. And they got loans from the government. Now I'm going to point that out: loans, not grants. There were no giveaways at the time. This was money they had to pay back.
At the time, there was no
giveaway. Yeah, and the people who needed service built these cooperatives themselves. And it worked very well, to the point that in 1948, when rural Missouri came along, they were selling so much electricity they needed to build power plants. And the existing power companies, they were pretty cool with the electric co-ops. When they first got started, they were doing something that they didn't want to do, couldn't make a profit
feasible.
on. Yeah. Well, now all of a sudden these electric co-ops are kicking butt. And
what's been the shift?
So they you start out and you got electricity. You probably had one light hanging on you had a pole chain in the middle of the room, but you lived on a farm, and you were doing things like, if you needed water for your cattle, you'd go out and you'd pump the the pump and the cistern, and water'd come out in 5-gallon buckets, and you'd carry about 1,000 of these out to the cows. That got old pretty quick. So what do you do next? You put in an electric pump. Now you got running water in the house, flush toilets. What a great thing. Don't need the outhouse anymore.
Yeah, perfect.
And it didn't take long before they were using a lot of electricity. Just thinking about a dairy farm, maybe you start out, you got about 10 head of cattle. So you got to milk those by hand, right? So now you get an electric milker. Now you can have 60, 80, 100 head, and you can milk them with electricity. Blankets, right? You got all these things.
Yeah.
Sure. So anyway, now they're starting to build power plants, and also these dams came into Missouri, Table Rock, Norfolk, Bull Shoals. And the federal government owned those, and they were generating electricity
that the co-ops were using.
Yeah, and they had first rights to those.
The co-ops had first rights?
They do, because it's nonprofit. Should go to the people who are paying the taxes, and not to someone who's going to take that and then make money on top of it. Okay. But all these things kind of got the existing power companies upset. So right away, if you look back in those days, you see articles in publications like Reader's Digest, Newsweek, Time Magazine, and they're saying that electric co-ops are socialist organizations, and they're going to bring about the downfall of the United States. These are all paid for by companies that didn't like the electric co-ops.
Interesting.
So what do? How do you go? You don't have much money because you're a little co-op. You've got a few thousand members, and you don't have big war chests. So there's an old saying that you don't go to war with someone that buys their ink by the barrel. Well, the electric co-ops came together, and they started their own publication. It was called the Rural Electric Missourian at the time. And right away, right out the door, 100,000 copies, the first issue. So instead of buying their ink by the barrel, they were buying it by the trainload, and they could fight back on these messages that it strictly weren't true. And they could tell their own message. At the same time, they could teach members about safety, electrical safety. They could show them things like how electric heat could change their way of life. And all kinds of things like that. You don't think about it.
Things that you would probably need to know and stuff like that.
Yeah, because nobody had a clue, what electricity could do for them.
But that's socialist right there, apparently. So
that's what they thought. That's what people were told.
I love how the same tactic has been used time after time.
That's right. I'm happy to say it's been 48 years since magazine came in, and we did not bring about the downfall of the country. At the same time, the utilities now get together. We've got a seat at the table. When we build power lines, we work together to make sure that we're not duplicating services. Still not perfect, but there's definitely a lot of respect for the electric co-ops around the state. And the magazine was a big part of that.
So I got to ask, what is a co-op? Like, can you explain that for the people listening?
Can, yeah.
Talking about earlier, you explained that to me.
So you've probably heard the saying that it's cheaper by the dozen. So you and I, if we tried to do something, let's just say we're farmers and we need to build a bunch of fence, and we go in, we look at the price of barbed wire, and like, wow, this is expensive, we can't afford this.
Yeah.
But then you tell your neighbor, and he said, well, I need to build some fence too, and let's check with the other neighbor, and pretty soon you've got maybe 100 farmers that need barbed wire. Well, now you can go in, you can negotiate for a better price for that. And that's exactly what happened when MFA, it's a farmers cooperative that's in Missouri. That's exactly how they started. Farmers needed to build fences and came together and said, we can buy wire cheaper if we buy it by the dozen.
Separated amongst
each
other.
And then they said, well, if it works for barbed wire, maybe it'll work for other something else, tractors or all that. So, it was a great idea. But that's strictly what a cooperative is. It's people working together to provide a good or service without profit. And guess what happens? Let's say we make a profit. We didn't mean to, but we had a really good year and we made a profit. What do you think a cooperative does with that money?
They put it into marketing, maybe?
Well, first of all, they'll put it back into the company, so you don't have to go borrow money and pay interest. You use that money for a little while.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then this is the cool thing about co-ops. They give it back to their members. What a crazy concept.
Oh, okay.
So at the
Because
end
I
of
was
the year,
gonna. Okay.
if they had a good year, electric co-ops will get a capital credit. So sometimes it's a credit on their bill. Sometimes it's a check, and do whatever you want with it.
So
So pretty cool.
when you're saying that it's so this is what I'm trying to understand. So where does the money come for you guys to get paid? Does it comes from the loans pretty much that
Yeah,
y'all take
well,
from the
let's
government?
say so. So they built the co-op. They
Hmm.
have people using their services.
Yeah.
Money comes back in. They set a rate that lets them recover their expenses and just a little bit more.
Yeah.
To proceed money for the future. And so that's what goes into running it, is the payments back on the services that they provide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a
Do the linemen get paid and stuff
sure.
like that?
Yeah, they
Or
do.
okay.
They're very good jobs. So they tend to be very large employers. Some of them we have co-ops that are small and they might have 15 employees. We have others that might have 150. It just depends on the size of the organization.
So
Um,
so what's a day in your life look like? I gotta
So
ask.
mine's a little different. So I am a journalist. I have a degree in photojournalism,
Uh,
and I work for these co-ops, and I help them with their communication. My primary responsibility is editing the magazine.
okay.
So a day like me for me could be just about anything. But I'll
Could be doing a
typically,
podcast.
yeah, I might be doing a podcast. I do a lot of speaking. I've hit just about every Rotary club in the state,
Oh, nice.
Optimist clubs and things like that. I love to talk about rural Missouri and the electric co-ops. But we'll find somebody that we're going to feature in the magazine. My most recent story was on a man who's repairing the clock in the courthouse in Bloomfield, Missouri, down in southeast Missouri.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that involves strapping on all my camera gear, climbing up a real rickety ladder, about, I don't know, 50, 60, 80 feet off the ground in the tower of this courthouse, and taking pictures of this man who's taken this clock apart and completely rebuilt it. And hopefully, when he gets done, the clock will chime on the hours.
Hopefully.
Yeah, so
Oh, wow.
that's just one of, it might be a restaurant. We might be out at some, we used to call them out of the way eats, restaurants that are out in the country somewhere,
Mhm.
but really good food and people don't know about it.
Oh, like little holes in the walls and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
and some of these are
Okay.
just absolutely outstanding restaurants. And this is something I learned from one of our readers. They said every Thursday, we've got three couples, we get together and we'll go anywhere within 100-mile radius and eat. If it's a good
Ooh,
place. And I
interesting.
thought, wow, if people will go 100 miles,
Dude,
we can put them
yeah.
on in the magazine. And we have heard people, restaurants, people show up with their magazine in their hand, and the place runs out of food by noon, because
That's a
they have so
good
many people
that's a
come
good
in.
problem to have.
Yeah, it really
Yeah.
is.
That's
It
a
can
yeah.
really help them, which is, I kind of feel like that's our mission now, is to help these rural businesses succeed.
That's real
We can
interesting
really
because
do that.
I've always loved we used to do stuff like that in school. We would write about things the way that we did the way that I was brought up with writing and stuff like that was you would pick something that you like a restaurant or something, you would write a piece about it and then you
Sure.
present it and then the teacher would just basically grade you. And I feel like that's always something that I love and I enjoy reading pieces about food, specifically food,
Yeah.
grappling, and recently I started reading on military history, just because it's just been interesting me. But that's real beautiful that y'all really give back to the community. And the other thing that I wanted to touch upon, which I think is really interesting, is these trips that these linemen are doing to
Yeah.
other countries. Can you tell me a little bit about that? We're talking about it
Yeah,
offline.
sure. Yeah, this is the it's our national association. It's called the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association. They're based
That's a
in,
mouthful.
yeah, we call it NRECA. It's a little easier. They have an international program, and for years, this goes back to about the time I was born, in the early '60s. They started sending linemen to developing countries that don't have electricity, and
How do
it's
they
worked
pick?
so well. How do they pick them?
Yeah, like
Yeah,
that's my
they
first
put the
question.
word out, that they're looking for linemen, and people will volunteer. Some of them take vacation. Sometimes the cooperative will just grant them leave. because it develops them as a person, makes them a better person.
Yeah.
They learn to think on their feet, because picture this. So linemen today, they typically have a bucket truck. They can get up high in the bucket truck. They've got another truck called a digger derrick that drills the holes for the poles and lifts them up and puts them in the ground. They've got all this equipment, hydraulic equipment, cordless drills, all the things that modern society
you have a plethora of tools at your disposal that probably, I would say 15 years ago, 20 years ago, you didn't have.
Yeah. So now we take them, drop them on a mountain in the Andes in Bolivia without any of those tools and say, build a fire line. And they do it the old fashioned way.
Are you sure that you guys aren't trying to train people to be operators or something like that?
Now here's the case. This is the interesting thing. Exercise. So this is the interesting thing. Let's say we have a big ice storm or a flood or something, and you can't get those trucks into the fields. What are you going to do? You got to climb the pole. You got to pick the pole up and carry it in where it needs to go. So these are good skills to have, and they're things that the lineman schools still teach.
Bro, this sounds like special forces selection is what this sounds like.
If you saw these guys, I think you could put them anywhere on earth and tell them to do just about anything and they'll get it done.
Jesus,
they're amazing.
Their level of the physicality to it has to be probably.
It is.
So how do you pick, like, how are linemen picked? Like,
well, like I say, they do volunteer. We'll put the word out, and say, we're going to do a program, and they're selected. I mean, they made aware of the challenges. Of course, they're going to have to be fit. They're going to have to be in good health. And willing to do this, to be away from home. Most of these projects are about 17 days that they're away from their families.
17 days.
Yeah.
Without
sleeping on an air mattress, with
the homies.
That's right. with a bunch of people you've never met before.
Bro, that sounds like Iraq. I'm sold.
Military guys make great electric co-op employees. They really do.
Do you have a lot of military people?
Oh, sure. There actually is a program that encourages them to apply. And
could you please talk to me about that?
So there you go.
Yeah, I'd like to hear about that, because we have a lot of military people that listen.
Yeah. But it's a really cool thing. And I've been on 5 of these trips now. The first ones were in Bolivia. The last 2 were in Guatemala. The first one was in the Amazon region, a place called River Alta in the Amazon country. Low lying things, jungle terrain.
Bro, everything is trying to kill you in the Amazon. How long was that trip?
I thought that was 17 days. I thought we'd see a lot of wildlife. We really didn't.
Really?
What this was, the town is River Alta, which is a pretty large town by Bolivian standards. And they went out with a bulldozer, cleared away the jungle, leveled it off, and gave little lots to people to build houses. We saw houses made out of homemade bricks that were made on site. We saw some that looked like, I don't know where they got the wood, packing crates.
I got to see pictures of that.
Yeah, tin roofs. Not a living thing hardly out there.
Dude, I pray to God we never go to war with people in the Amazon, dude.
Oh my gosh.
That's terrifying.
No kidding. But it wasn't scary at all. Wonderful people, just so wonderful. But living in these little bitty houses with no electricity, hot, very hot, dry, dusty, little gaps in the board, so you get a little breeze.
Very humid also is the problem.
Very humid. Sweats just pouring off of you all the time.
I can tell you have not been to Puerto Rico yet, good sir. The humidity would hit you immediately as soon as you get out of the airport.
Well, the opposite of that, the next project we did was in near Cochabamba, in a little town called Chapacirca, not even a town really. It took us an entire day to drive up and up and up and up and up,
just in the mountains
to 12,000 feet. At the low point, that's where the village was.
Do you have interpreters with you?
We had interpreters. I speak a little Spanish, just enough to get, but it didn't matter because they don't speak Spanish. These are the descendants of the Incas. And a completely different
that's an
language.
exotic.
Yeah. So what you find is the little kids who are in school speak Spanish. Their parents do not.
Yeah.
And so
Isn't it
we're
interesting how they always take the kids to learn, make them learn
sure.
both languages
Yeah.
so they can interpret for their parents?
Yeah.
That's
That was very
interesting.
interesting. We got in there. The poles were all supposed to be set already,
Mhm.
and the men were going to just string wire. When they got there, none of the poles had been set.
Was the hole even done?
A few, not very many. So what we did, they organized people and they went in there and just, I mean, you've never seen dirt fly like this. These guys wanted electricity so bad,
Yeah, because they're up,
and
I
they
mean,
would work
24 hours.
ahead of us. They'd have whole teams of people just taking turns with shovels digging these holes, big rocks, very rocky terrain, and then setting these poles by hand. So they would get the pole near the hole, and they'd hook
You'd
ropes
hook
to
ropes
it
to
and
pick it
just
up.
get behind it and
Yeah.
push and pull and falls down, and there you
What
go.
happens when you got to get
Yeah.
creative.
So
That's
they did.
wild.
That was amazing. Beautiful country. You see llamas everywhere. They
What did you eat?
farmed. So they actually brought a chefs from a restaurant and they set up a makeshift kitchen.
Okay.
But we had things like trout came out of the streams up there. Lots of potatoes. That's their industry up there.
Yeah,
They
the
grow
industry,
potatoes.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Because of
don't know how
the
that grows.
elevation.
How can that grow it that high?
Bro, it grow and it
Yes.
tastes very different from what I'm
Yes.
told. Because my friend Edgar, who I was telling you
Yeah.
earlier, he's like, dude, even the food
Yeah.
is different. Like,
Sure.
in Ecuador, the potatoes taste
Mhm.
very different from other places. But yeah, I've been told those potatoes are
Yeah.
they're very scrumptious.
Yeah. They were very nutritious. Of course, right at the source,
Yeah,
getting them right
yeah, right
there.
there. How did you guys
Very
get water?
well, so water's a problem, and we brought up truckloads of bottled
Bottled water.
water.
Yeah,
When we were in River Alta, the water came in bags. They were little
yeah.
bags about 4 inches square, and you'd
Hmm.
fill your pockets with them. Had to be very careful, because our stomachs can't handle the water there, and
Yeah, you got to be careful with the
yeah,
bacteria.
I
Yeah.
think on the mountain we'd have been okay because it was coming. It was snow runoff. You
Probably,
know.
but then the problem is
Mhm.
that if any animal that you don't have an immunity to like peed on it or something,
Oh, sure.
because there's still animals in those spots
Yeah,
that like
that's
we don't,
true.
like we had
Mm.
a lady that I definitely should introduce you to her. She's a
Mm.
bug expert.
Ah,
What's it called? I always forget. Entomologist.
yeah.
And she was telling me one day she has a
Mm.
colony of scorpions now.
Oh my.
Telling you she'd be very interesting to
Good
talk to.
times. Yeah.
And she goes, did you know that there's,
Mm.
over hundreds of scorpion species that we have yet to
Oh,
discover, but we know exist of? I go, what do you mean we know? She's like, oh, people
yeah.
know that they exist, but they don't study the venom. And I'm like,
Ah,
why wouldn't you? She's like,
yeah.
and she's like, oh, money and things.
Sure.
But yeah, there's that's why one of the things, because I remember in the army,
Mm.
when they're teaching you like survival stuff, that's
Mm.
one of the things. Not survival, it's more like, hey,
Mm.
if you ever get lost, watch the river that you drink from, because there could be
Yeah.
an animal. If you're in certain areas, then yeah, it's relatively safe or whatever. But yeah, in other countries,
Mm.
I would be very, ooh man,
Yeah.
that's just
No, you
wild.
just can't take a chance.
Yeah, no,
And
you'd get
guys did
jarred
get a
though.
little sick.
Mm.
We did pretty good. We take medicine, and they had some stuff there. If you did get sick, it would. There were two pills. One of them, it said it would kind of slow your bodily functions down. The other one would stop it cold. And no, I don't know if anybody ever had to take that one.
I hope not, because that sounds like eating an MRE.
Yeah, there you
That's
go.
literally what an MRE is meant to do.
Yeah.
Is yeah. That's why I don't know if an MRE poop, or that's
Yeah.
the PG version. But when you have the MRE poops, like people don't mess with you in the military,
I
man. Like
get
they're
it.
like, vaya con Dios.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
That's
But
so cool
but
though.
there again, so the coolest thing, and nobody in this country has ever seen what happened back in the 30s,
Mhm.
where people got electricity for the first time and just, tears of joy and gratitude. But the village in Guatemala, this really came home. They got the lines hooked up and all that, and the school was wired ahead of time,
Wow.
and they made the last connection. And this old man who was the village elder went in and flipped the switch, and the lights came on for the first time, and just tears coming down.
Yeah.
And then the little kids, and everybody's got to try it. And that, we thought they're going to wear that switch out. But it's an incredible feeling, and to know, that they would have never had this without these guys, because they just, the money's not there. There are areas that have electricity, but to get it to these little villages, it's just too much money. So they can provide the labor, and then the materials come from like USAID for international development, various programs like that. So very cool, but the
That's
culture,
pretty cool.
is
Yeah.
different. And
Yeah,
they make
I would expect.
friends,
Yeah, yeah.
and the kids are just crazy. They just, everybody makes friends with these kids. Pretty soon you see these big burly linemen that, never crack a smile, and they've got two kids, one on each shoulder, and they're carrying them around, and they're playing horse.
Do you
and
always go to these?
all that. I have been on all five. Now
Okay.
these are group projects where we'll take, a dozen people or so. In the past, they would get one from Missouri and one from Wisconsin and put them together as a team. Now it's a kind of a state approach where each state puts together a group and a leader and takes them over. So we'll go back in 2023 in December. We'll have a team in December, and then we'll have a team that follows up in January. And we'll go back to Guatemala, is what we expect.
You need any interpreters?
So we might. Yeah, I know just enough Spanish to get in trouble.
I know a little bit more than that.
It's amazing what comes back to you. I never had a chance to use it. I had to take a foreign language in college, and it does come back to you a little bit.
I've been bilingual since I was young.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty much mandated in my house.
Yeah, that's
my dad was very, very, very critical of it. And if you didn't know a word, he's like, all right, go figure it out.
Figure it out.
Go figure it out.
That's great because you never know when that'll come in handy.
Yeah, but then you become an interpreter, and you kind of like, like I hate when I see people mess up interpreting.
Yeah.
Like it's like Dave Chappelle has a joke that he says, I hate seeing people able to do comedy because it's like watching someone else do your wife. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Like, I can do it better.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And that's how I feel.
Would that make your brain hurt when you're
it does.
That's actually a very off, right?
It's actually a very So that's actually a very good question. Most people don't ask that question, actually. And it's a little trick that I teach. You have simultaneous and continuous interpretation, right? Meaning that when you look at a machine, at an MRI scan, Edgar Hidalgo showed me this. When you look at someone that's simultaneously interpreting, right? Their whole brain lights up.
Yeah, right.
Your brain cannot stay that lit up for very long.
Yeah.
The most that I can do is 3 hours.
Yeah.
Nonstop. I've done it before.
Yeah.
But the problem is that you get very tired, and you get what's called, you get what's called like, they call them, I've been told they're called like lightning headaches, or like the top part of your vision is blurry. So a trick that I do, and I can do it for way longer, is I close my eyes. I just close my eyes.
Don't need the sight.
I don't need my sight.
Of it. Yeah.
I just need to listen.
There you
and go. I've told this to like a couple of interpreters, and they're like, yeah, but you would look weird. I go, no, you wouldn't. Well, who's going to mess with the interpreter? Guess what? If I'm not there, see, you get it.
Right.
If I'm not here, you can't work. You're going to criticize what I'm going to do, bro. Shut up and talk.
That's right.
So like I've done that before, where I'll do an hour and a half like that, and I get no headache. I'll take a 30-minute break, go to my next session, do an hour. And like the flow of communication doesn't stop,
Yeah.
And it's easier that way.
Yeah.
The problem is people don't get that. People think like, oh, Google Translate.
You can do it all the time.
Yeah, you do it all the time. And if you train your brain, like my brain, I've learned to switch my brain. Like normally, like right now I'm thinking in English, right?
Yeah.
So it's easier. There's less there's less stuff like that. So I can have a conversation, communicate effectively. But if I switch my brain to think in Spanish and to talk in English, then a lot of times there might be a little bit of an and stuff like that. But you learn those tricks along the way. And it's really hard, because I know people that they never thought about it like that. And when they hear this for the first time, they're like, oh, does my brain? And they're like thinking, like you see that when it clicks, they're like going like this, like,
Oh
So
boy.
yeah, that's another thing that you have to be aware of. But there's a lot to interpreting that people
I bet that's
don't
right.
understand.
Yeah, I find myself going down the road and translating things I see, you know, that they're just trying to remember the words.
So imagine if your brain never stopped doing that, like mine.
That would be
Like
rough.
mine never stops. Like I'll look at something and my brain's doing it automatically. Like I've
Yeah.
always been like that. So that's one of the reasons why I love interpreting. Like,
Yeah.
it's like my number one thing. But I'm also very like when someone tries to check me on something, like I'm very like what? So
Well, Spanish is a beautiful language, and there's
it
certain things
is.
I like that I like the sound in Spanish better than
It's a very sexy language, and there's a lot of emphasis on the sexy part, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know, that's why they call it, you know, the la lengua del amor, the the language of love, you know, because lengua could mean language or it could also mean tongue.
Sure.
So you have to like watch how you interpret that. That's why I love like American sayings, like like the first time I heard this one, I was like, it is what it is, and I'm like, what the fuck is it? Like, that's literally how I felt, because I was like, what are you talking about? And people like look at you
I
funny.
bet English has got to be tough for
because people they don't understand like where you're coming from is like, hey, I wasn't, you know, I wasn't born, raised, or educated here. I moved here. Like, granted, I have visited, which is why I hate when I hear when Puerto Rican people message me. They're like, you're making us sound uncultured. And it's not that. It's just you have to understand it's different.
Yeah.
Like, I never realized that. I never really watch a lot of TV. And I have a friend of mine, Andy Chudamello, which shout out to Andy. He brought me back a bottle of Don Q when he went to the island, and everybody made fun of me because, like, I've never seen the movie My Girl, Top Gun, the first one, Top Gun, Jaws. I recently saw Jaws. So with all those things, like, there's a lot of things that I have to catch up, but the sayings is like the thing that gets me
tough.
The most.
Well, we were taught Spanish. I had it in 8th grade. I started taking Spanish classes, and some of the things that they say don't they're not used in other countries.
You can't translate.
Like they would tell us por seguro and what else? Just certain things that, but of course, and
then there's dialects. And then it doesn't.
The dialects are so different.
That's the thing, is like you have to, like, a problem that a lot of interpreters have is they don't. Like, I try to communicate with as many like people who speak a different dialect of Spanish than me. That's what's made me successful over the years. Is if I meet someone who's like, I'm from Nicaragua, I force myself to talk Spanish to them. Like, hey, what do you mean by that? You know, like, what does this mean? But most people don't do that. So then you teach a class about it. Like, I teach a class about Spanish slang, and you'll have like 100 people, and they're going, oh, I didn't think about that. We say it like this. And I'm like, yes, that's what this is about.
Well, this is kind of a funny story, but in when we were in Bolivia, when we get done on the weekends, they would take us back into Cochabamba. And the guy that we worked with over there, he was he was a kind of an interpreter, but he was really the project engineer.
Yeah.
And he would take us to restaurants, and we would experience different foods. And one of them was this steak place, like kind of a Brazilian steakhouse, like I have here. And they kept bringing out different meats, and we would ask him, what's this? And it might be chicken hearts, and he gets to one, and it's like a thin slice of meat, little cutlets. And we said, what is this? He says, oh, it's very good, very good. And well, what is it? And he says, I can't think of the English word. He says, what is it? Cow titty. And of course, that's an udder. And I'll have to say, it was the best cow udder I've ever had.
Yeah, we
and probably the last.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you eat in other countries that in the U.S. they probably would consider weird, like frog legs.
Yeah,
there's a lot of places that they don't eat that, but that's a delicacy.
Oh,
you know what I'm saying? Iguana, like, not a lot of people. I'm sure there's obviously people listening go, I eat it. Yeah, cool. But if you look at everybody else, like, I remember the first time I told somebody I had what was it? I think it was cow tongue and frog legs. And I was just talking to somebody, like, just saying I had it, and they're like, oh my God, how could you eat that? I'm like, with my mouth. Like, what the fuck else would I?
Frog legs are great.
Yeah, frog legs are.
You can get them.
Oh yeah, if you go to the Dominican though, Dominican, bro,
very good.
To my knowledge, because we have a friend, Manuel Quesada. He runs a very big and famous tobacco company called Quesada Cigars, and dude, there's the food there is amazing, but you gotta watch out where you go.
Yeah. And we got tired of black beans every meal.
Oh yeah,
Black beans.
messes your stomach up.
Yeah. And then fried bananas. That was pretty, or plantains, or probably plantains.
Yeah, no, that's probably
too.
fried plantain. If you put salt with it, like there's the thing with the plantains is there's things you can do with it. You can put salt and ketchup with it. You can eat it with like not beans, I'm sorry, with like little bit of scrambled eggs on top with some onions and stuff, and then you lather a little of like melted butter. There's a lot of things you can do, but it can get really old real quick.
Yeah. That was kind of a, the guys talk about that still, we got a little tired of that, but otherwise it was great. We enjoyed the food and the culture. Guys just brought back all kinds of stuff. Machetes were so cool. In Guatemala, everybody has a machete.
Yep.
When you're 2 years old, you got a machete.
Yep.
And they can't help it. It's just like Americans would be. You walk up to a wooden post or a tree, and you gotta take a chunk out of it.
You gotta take a chunk.
So they would bargain for these and buy them, and then we saw them later. They were in the hardware stores, and they were cheap, But it meant something that these came from that area. And then
it's like
the better ones had leather scabbards.
Oh, nice.
That were very intricately designed and very cool thing to have, bring back for a souvenir.
It's always nice. Yeah,
life-changing experience for sure.
So I know weather's starting to get a little crazy. So what's next for the magazine? What's next for you? Like what's coming up? Like what's happening?
Well, so there's a deadline coming around every month. And it's kind of like, I don't know if you saw the commercial, the guy that comes in and he says, I got to make the donuts. And then the end of the day, he says, I made the donuts. And then the next morning he's got to make the donuts. Those deadlines just keep coming around. So we try to stay ahead of them, but something we're working on is to do more, more of an online presence, because we know the readership's changing. Right now you can find us on Facebook. We've got a presence on Instagram, Pinterest.
All the same rural Missouri.
We repackage it and different things. Also YouTube. Are
you guys on TikTok? I know that's the hard one to get.
Not yet. We might be there in the future. The YouTube though, we have a big following on YouTube. Nice. Every one of our restaurants that we feature, we do a video with it. So there's a whole channel there that you can see if you're looking for a good place to eat, you can watch the video.
That's amazing.
And some of our videos, 50,000, 60,000 views.
Good. It's good for those people too,
out there.
Man.
Yeah, it is. It's great. So look for more of that. Magazine has been digital since 2010. So people can go to our website, ruralmissouri.org. They can find the digital magazine and they can flip through it that way. And there's little pop-up videos embedded in there. And we have a recipe section. You click on that and it pops up and, with a bonus recipe. Sometimes there's sound bites in there. Let's say we do a musician, people want to hear the music. So we might do a little pop-up audio segment where they can hear him play.
That's pretty good. And you guys are the third or the second biggest magazine, I think?
We're actually the largest. We call it paid circulation monthly, and we're about 580,000 and growing. Every month it grows a little bit. So we buy a lot of ink and a lot of paper.
It's a lot of good things that they do also.
Yeah,
like a lot of beautiful things, and I definitely love to have you back to circle back and see what you guys are doing.
Yeah, we can talk more about some of the specifics we do. History pieces we've done over the year. We love Missouri history.
That's actually what we're trying to do. Concentrate next year for the podcast is history. Yeah, specifically Missouri history, because I'm interested in that. Because again, like growing up, you don't really get taught specifically American history. So it's like really, it feels weird to me that I live in Missouri and I'd like to know more about that. Yeah. So that's interesting.
So we're interested in, everybody knows about Harry Truman and, general Pershing and things like that. We're looking for guys like when I did the very first American to shoot down a plane, member of the military to shoot down an enemy plane. You've never heard of this person. His name was Lieutenant Stephen Thompson. He was from West Plains, Missouri.
Interesting.
And he was flying. He was actually an artillery guy, and he talked his way onto a French airplane. They needed their tail gunner was sick, and he said, "Are you a pilot? Are you a machine gunner?" And he said, "Of course I am." And he gets in the back of this plane. They fly over Germany, and dang if he didn't shoot down a plane. And interesting story. It's a good one.
Dude, that dude probably got in so much shit.
You know what? Back. They were pretty proud of him.
They were?
Yeah.
Damn. Because I tell you what, if you did that nowadays, they'd be like,
yeah,
how many
he did get permission to fly along basically as an observer because we were putting together our own team. So they needed that. But those are the guys we're looking for. And they're all over.
Is he still kicking or
no, he's long gone. This was 17, something like that. Yeah. So another one, another military story for you. A man from Holden, Missouri. I called him Holden's hero. He's a Congressional Medal of Honor winner. Nobody's ever heard of him. This guy climbed in an abandoned tank and held off the entire German army with a machine gun.
1940.
This was World War One. So again,
okay, yeah, no,
and
my World War Medal of Honor, because I'm a Medal of Honor buff guy.
Yeah,
dude,
yeah,
love it.
I'll send you the story. Some other ones. I mean, we've just found all kinds of just really interesting stories. Are you familiar with Jim the Wonder Dog?
I am not.
This is another great one we've covered. Jim you could tell him go find somebody who has a green dress on, and he would walk through the crowd and point out the person with the green dress.
Dog?
If you asked him to do multiplication, he would take his paw and he would give you the answer.
A dog.
Extremely mysterious. Nobody knows how he did it. And 100% true. This is documented. Every newspaper in the nation had stories about him. His name is Jim the Wonder Dog. If you want to know all about Jim, you can go to Marshall, Missouri, and there's a museum there dedicated to Jim the Wonder Dog. You go a little further down the road to Warrensburg. There's another dog story. This one's about Old Drum, and all Old Drum did was get shot. And it inspired one of the most famous court cases ever. Were these two lawyers who both went on to great fame. One of them was a U.S. senator. The other one was a Civil War general. And they fought it out in the courts over whether this dog should pay him for the dog. And what came out of that is the idea of man's best friend, the dog being man's best friend. And I challenge you to look up Old Drum in Vest's eulogy to the dog. It's a tribute to this dog. And if you can read that and not have tears just pouring down your face, then you're one hard, cold person. It's incredible. I
gotta pull this up.
Challenge you to look that up.
I gotta pull that up
and read it on air next time you're doing it.
Yeah, I'll pull. I don't want to cry right
now. Never. It should never be forgotten. But those are just some examples of things we've done. Try to get obscure things. And at the end of the day, if we can kind of root for the underdog, give somebody that's doing something really cool a little credit for what they're doing, and maybe
that's beautiful.
Inspire somebody that lives in a different part of the state to try something similar. Then we're happy.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, brother, I appreciate you coming.
Well, happy to do it. It's an honor to be on here. You've had some great names, and I'm humbled that you called me and asked me to be here.
No, man, I appreciate you doing this, man. And anytime you want to come back, you're more than welcome, brother.
Well, sounds great. I know the way now.